Resolving global conflicts, can a new world order suffice? Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of your discursive program. It is a Global Insider brought to you by GLOBUS, and of course today we are looking at the probability of the new world order bringing resolve to the numerous conflicts ranging from politics, economics, social, culture, and others, as we see in a more turbulent society. Discrepancies have marked the global stage as interconnected and largely proxy conflicts continue to mark the global stage, hijacking the philosophies of globalization, international cooperation, and the overall concept of a global village. It is more evident now that the society has moved from ideological war to a more and severe physical confrontation. The recent Middle East escalation between Israel and Iran, proxy and geopolitical wars, the regional conflicts, particularly in Africa and elsewhere, challenge an earlier opinion that the 21st century was going to represent a post-conflict and a more globalized society with respect for humanity. Faced with these confrontations, there is a dire need for global peace and solidarity to navigate the new realities of the world, which include changing power dynamics, among others. Therefore, we ask this question: can the precepts of the New World Order guarantee a clearer trajectory or scope for conflict resolution in the world at large? You are most welcome, and together with a panel of experts, we are going to analyze this topic in total to get some of the key points pertaining conflicts in the global world, conflict resolution, and probably if the principle or ideology of the New World Order is very practical in solving these conflicts that we are actually experiencing in the world of today. Thank you, and join you right after the jingle. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this other rendezvous of your discursive and knowledge-sharing program. It is Global Insight, brought to you by GLOBUS, and we continue to analyze issues of utmost importance and looking at how we can actually bring some practical analysis that can help in solving interconnected problems of the world. And today our focus is actually on global conflicts, be it on the sphere of economics, politics, social, and what you can name the rest. And of course, we know that recently there have been actually viewpoints or opinions and even ideologies actually saying that with the new changes that have occurred or are occurring in the global world, it is imperative to bring forth a new world order that will actually not to challenge but replace some of the old world order principles which are no longer practical in the new realities of today, especially as we are in the world of changing power dynamics, of course, shifting alliances, and of course, new alliances. How can we navigate this peacefully to ensure the respect for humanity? And of course, like already highlighted in the preamble, it is a knowledge sharing program with a panel of experts. We're going to have a clearer understanding and of course highlight what is peculiar or what is practical as the world faces some severe confrontations which are no longer ideological, and now at the physical stage we are actually looking at the recent confrontation between Israel and Iran, and we can also note some of all of the plethora of crises across the African continent and more. And of course, without much ado, let's get straight away to the United States of America. Joining Steve Gill, a political commentator who is with us this day to give his own analysis or opinion pertaining a topic for discussion, which Haberson probably dwells on the ability of the New World Order principle in solving this crisis. Welcome to you, Steve. And I'll welcome you by actually posing a very important question. We're talking about conflict and the New World Order. Let's try to understand the key terms before looking at the possibility of this New World Order principle in solving a global crisis.
Yeah, Clarisse, thank you for having me, and thank you for letting me speak with your viewers. I think that as we look at resolving conflict, whether it's physical, whether it's economic, all the other conflicts we see around the world, conversation like we're having is the first step towards resolving those conflicts in a peaceful way. And I think that as we look at whether it's in Gaza, whether we look at Ukraine, Russia, whether we look at Israel and Iran, all around the globe, even in conflicts within Africa, between countries and with some of the former colonizers who are still putting their heavy thumb on the scales in Africa. When you're talking, you're at least moving, hopefully, towards resolution, towards understanding. And I think what we see in the world too little today is the talks that can lead to peace, the talks that can lead to economic cooperation, and at least. In those circumstances where we look at actual military conflict, when you stop talking, you head into more conflict, and you may not reach resolution, you may not have a successful negotiation through conversation, through talking, but you will never get to a resolution other than militarily or with more disastrous economic effects if you stop talking to each other.
You, Steve. What is the possibility of probably that a new economic order would emerge that can probably mitigate or curtail some of these conflicts which the global world is facing now along the lines of economy? We know about the confrontation between the US and China and other examples which you better understand. Do you see this new economic order as a way forward towards mitigating the turbulence that we have in the world now?
I think when you look at countries and economies, when there is a fair playing field where you can trade with kind of transparency and fairness, you're going to see more economic growth. You're going to see more economic prosperity. And I think that's one of the things that President Trump has tried to accomplish with his tariffs, pointing out that the U.S. has faced very high tariffs and very high other barriers, non-tariff barriers to U.S. products and U.S. services getting into other countries. I think you're seeing those tariffs start to come down. You're seeing the basis of economic cooperation with the U.S. and China, with the U.S. and the United Kingdom, with the U.S. and EU countries moving forward as there's a recognition that there should be a reciprocal level, a fair trade level that's in place. And I think that will lead to more prosperity, not only for the U.S., but around the world. And as you and I have talked before, Africa continues to suffer under the yoke of decades, centuries of colonization that continue to take the resources of Africa from Africa to benefit the colonizing countries, the former colonizing countries. And the prosperity of Africa depends, in my view, on Africa being able to benefit from their own resources, Africa being able to develop and get a fair share of their own resources rather than seeing all those resources taken away and Africa left in poverty. So I think that when we look at the tariffs globally, we have to recognize that transparency and fairness works there. But I think the same thing is true in Africa. We have to reach a level of fairness where Africans benefit from their resources rather than just Europeans.
at the moment, a political scientist and also founder of GLOBUS Expert Club. Welcome, dear Yulia. Today we are looking at very pertinent issues at this point in time that the world is in a form of turbulence. So what is your overall appraisal of our topic for today, probably revolving around conflict and global world order or new global world order? Hello, Yulia. Steve, I think before we get to Yulia, I think I'm going to continue the discussion with you, hoping that everything will be well for us to continue with Yulia, listening critically. Now let's look at how the decisions by President Donald Trump were still on the tariffs, and of course now we see him imposing some probably travel restrictions on many other countries. And in our preamble, we made mention of the fact that these the plethora of conflicts have actually challenged or hijacked the philosophies of globalization and international corporations that probably brings about the practicality of the global village. So what analysis can you give to probably the decisions taken by the leadership of the U.S. and how this undermines probably the old world order of probably globalization and cooperation for mutual respect or understanding?
Thank you. And first of all, it's great to see my friend Yulia as well. Appreciate anytime I'm on a panel with her. I think the challenge for the U.S. and what President Trump is trying to address is that for the last 4 years, certainly, and over the last several decades, we've had essentially an open border that has allowed tens of millions of people to enter our country, stay in our country, where we really don't know who many of them are. Many of them come wanting to work and get a better life, but there is no question that some of them come with more dangerous intentions, whether they are terrorists, whether they are parties to some of the terrorist groups around the world. And I think what President Trump is trying to do, as we have slowed the flood of those coming into our country across the border illegally to a trickle, now figuring out how you deport those who are here illegally, working here illegally, engaging in activities that are illegal, whether it's driving or driving without insurance, a whole host of crimes that are needing to be addressed. And then when you overlay that with countries that we can't really document very well, very effectively, who people are. They don't have a very strong ID system, and particularly from some of the countries that are sponsors of terrorism, we don't know who's coming in. So I think that the main focus of the travel restrictions is to figure out a better way to deter and then make U.S. still accessible to those who want to travel here, do business here, and be a part of our country and our culture.
Thank you for that. Just to note that when sweeping measures come, we begin to ask questions as to why at this time we actually know about the history of the U.S. and if we see U.S. as a great part to this, Steve, we cannot actually undermine the contributions that came from immigrants. I think we'll come back to that for more clarity. While we welcome Yulia BERG, political scientist and founder of GLOBUS Expert Club. Welcome to the discussion this day, dear Yulia.
Hello, once again, I'm happy to join the program today, and I think the topic that is being discussed is extremely important right now. Because what we're facing as the global community and what some of the local communities are facing is a complete lack of understanding of the rules and principles that do define relationships between the countries at the regional level, at the global level, and this makes the the overall situation quite unpredictable, unstable, and to a certain extent, or in certain cases, chaotic. So what we see now as well is a major escalation between Iran and Israel that also has risks, and the situation itself contains risks of use of nuclear weapons that both sides could be possessing. One side does possess those, and the other side might be able to have it quite soon. And we see the ongoing conflict in Ukraine countries, and the DRC situation that is not settled, and it's been decades that it wasn't settled, and Sudan is quite heated, and the relations between India and Pakistan are heated. There was just a recent exchange of military activities. So we see that there are many of those hotspots, and we see that there are many areas that can potentially go into a conflict, and we see that those conflicts are not being effectively managed. On the one hand, we do understand that the rules that were and the principles that were introduced by the UN are not effective anymore, because the Security Council and whatever it recommends does not have imperative, cannot be imperatively imposed. And then again, the UN and the UN peacekeeping missions are basically still relying on country-based troops, within those very rules and principles that are supposed to provide some kind of guidelines for conflict resolution. And I think this is where we're kind of building up to a different world order that would be kind of like associated with some kind of sub-national structures or international structures of a different nature. And I think the big fight is exactly for that, for being able to define. We see that BRICS, for example, an alliance that is not institutionalized on the one hand, and that is not really focused on conflict resolution, on military issues. It's not a military alliance. It's an alliance more based on economic and humanitarian activities that the countries exchange. Then we have some other organizations that probably would be restructured to a great extent, and this includes NATO, because NATO in reality perceived Russia as its greatest enemy, and now that the position of the US is different, now that Trump administration is more for doing business and is more for making deals, we will see that NATO would be losing the very foundation of its existence, right? Because sure, Europe probably wouldn't be making it on its own. And I mean, it's quite ridiculous even to try, because the US military spending is times and times bigger than the military spending of any of those countries, and in fact it's even bigger than all of the military budgets of other countries combined. So there is no way you can avoid that fact, and there is no way you can compete with that, with the US military might in terms of the expenses and the actual bases that it owns. So just like it was mentioned just a couple of days ago by the president of Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin, when he was talking to journalists prior to the St. Petersburg Economic Forum, the rules are very much out of having a referendum of a kind. But if you are Donetsk People Republic, even several referendums do not give you legitimacy in the eyes of the Western countries in order to choose the shape and form of governance within the region, right?
Sure.
So we see that what is actually going wrong is that there is no consensus at the international level, at the global level. That's why countries are becoming more defensive and aggressive at the same time, because when you don't have clear rules, when you don't have a stable situation that you can rely on, start using violence and you start using military instruments more than anything else. So we see that some of those efforts of the Trump administration in terms of peacemaking are also coming to sort of a dead different, and it's the framework where you cannot be talking about some fast and quick conflict resolution. So I think one of the key issues,
if we are talking about confrontations in the global world today, it is because of the fact that many people have understood the new realities, and like you said, when the old principles are no longer feasible, there is bound, there's room for this resistance, and this is what caused probably has caused the turbulence that we have along probably economic lines, political lines, geopolitical lines, and a whole lot of proxy wars happening across the globe. Now, when we talk about the new world order, there are people who still have some probably difficulty understanding. I will appreciate if you probably highlight some precepts of the old world order and what the new order stands to present, and how relevant it is in the process of global peace, keeping or conflict resolution.
well, I think that one of the major reasons for the need to change the global world order is that now we have a different set of countries that could be considered regional powers or global powers. So if, let's say, 50 years ago, the role of China at the international arena wasn't that huge, now we see that everyone basically depends on China in terms of, its tremendous production, right? So China supplies pretty much everything, everywhere, all over the world. So the role of countries like Brazil, India, some of the African countries, starting from South Africa, but definitely not limited to that, is also growing, and this has to be considered. What has to be considered is that, let's say, France, Belgium, they cannot play the patronizing role that they used to play to that extent on the African continent, and due to the fact that there is a certain renaissance of unity, has to be revised as well. And we see that some of the countries of Middle East are playing a greater role on the African continent at the moment, the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, and so on. So one of the key reasons why the global order is changing is that now there is a different set of actors, and relations between the different actors are to be redefined. Sure. And I think the same is valid for Russia, because Russia is not as huge in terms of economy, or is not as huge as China, for instance, or it's not as huge in terms of its military might as the United States. Yet at the same time, with the special military operation, it started the fight for the right to sovereignty itself, and the right to protect its interests, right? Sure, because for quite a while they were put aside, and at some point, realization came that Europe will probably never be looking at Russia as at an equal partner, unless that spot under the sun is taken by force, unfortunately.
Unfortunately, and of course, that is why platforms like Global Insider is here to actually help the world to navigate this phase with some comprehension of key issues, especially as far as international politics, globalization, and also the narratives of power dynamics are concerned, to be able to know how to go about it. And we this time around welcome Professor David MONDA, an international relations expert who is also a policy analyst. He's joining us from the United States of America. You're most welcome to Global Insight. Thus, the professor welcoming you, of course, with a question, and we are looking at the fact that from the African perspective, some pundits polarized the continent. With regional strife, we have diplomatic feuds, among others, derailing the country's strides in sovereignty and even global representation. So, how relevant is this topic to the African continent, especially as we know a whole lot of regional crises? We can cite the problems in the Democratic Republic of Congo and elsewhere, and see how this has kept the continent in a very hot place.
Yeah, maybe before I begin, I just want to make a few comments, sort of around the context of how we are understanding this new world order, and then situate it from the perspective of Africa and some of the challenges we have. So the major challenge we currently have is we have a multipolar world which has multiple centers of power, which is still dominated with a post-World War II power balance. And I think this is creating a big global disorder. In fact, some would really challenge the notion as to whether we have an order or a disorder, whereby the global norms and rules, the rules-based international order, are really being challenged from a range of different perspectives. I think that the major issue we have as to why we currently have conflict is that not all countries follow those rules accordingly. And a lot of countries want to challenge American hegemony and Western hegemony of the post-Cold War period, and the post Cold War international situation. So I think that's really important to understand. Absolutely. I think another element, before I address your question in terms of the instability, on the African continent, is if we're going to talk about a new order, what order is this? Absolutely. Because if you're going to talk about, well, we want to say, give the BRICS countries, a bigger role, well, BRICS is a cacophony, a mixture of so many different countries. You have major regional powers like Russia, like China, but you also have countries are autocratic systems, some countries are dictatorships, other countries are democracies. But I think the underlying challenge with this order and conflict, as we understand BRICS, for instance, and this contestation for the new world order is, whose order is that going to be? Because even within BRICS, we know there's a power hierarchy. So Russia and China, obviously with their military and diplomatic clout on the Security Council, have very asymmetric relationships with, say, countries like Ethiopia or United Arab Emirates or South Africa or even Brazil. But coming to your question on, on Africa, I think this becomes another major problem. Absolutely. Where we have major power asymmetries even on the continent. So take, for example, a situation of South Africa on the African continent as a very asymmetrical relationship, even regionally within SADC, right? South Africa dominates the Southern African. A lot of developing countries are sort of torn between Ukraine. A lot of developing countries are sort of torn between the United States, which has its own rules-based, order, within which it dominates. But we should also remember, Russia, as a former Soviet Union, dominated a union of Soviet socialist republics, which did not always want to be part of the USSR, and hence the disintegration of that system in 1991. And what exactly is a special military operation? Does Ukraine not have sovereignty within this global norms and this rules-based order? How does Russia justify invading a sovereign country that has its own sovereignty? Ukraine didn't attack Russia, Russia attacked Ukraine. So I think as we think, then to your question around the Democratic Republic of the Congo, I think this then creates a lot of these power asymmetries to the point now that the DRC unfortunately has to trade off $2 trillion worth of its mineral wealth to the United States in order for the US to intervene and bring Rwanda and the DRC together, just so that war can end, right? This question of economies of violence, because there's so many other foreign players in the DRC, not just the US. The Russians have interest in the DRC. The Chinese are exploiting the minerals in the DRC. The UAE is exploiting minerals in the DRC. And of course, a lot of these countries are doing it through a small regional power in Rwanda. So I really think we need to be careful in terms of how do we understand what this global order or disorder is, and whose interests will be advanced. Is it going to be a new order where Russia plays a bigger part? But then what will happen to the African continent? Will China play a bigger part? Well, then what happens to Southeast Asia, where China has been very aggressive, say within, the waters of Southeast Asia and the Malaga Strait, for a fairer multipolar world? Who's going to dominate this new regional space? Will it be Russia? And then will we then allow for big countries to invade small countries and take over the territory? Will it be that China has a bigger play? And where will Africa be? Because we know major powers like Russia, US, and China do not want Africa and developing countries to have a seat on the Security Council. It's not happened since 1945. It's 2025 and we're still making this argument. South America doesn't have a seat on the Security Council. It's dominated by the US, Russia, Britain, the UK, and China. The Philippines or Malaysia doesn't have a seat, or Cameroon for that matter. So I really think it's important as we talk about this order and try and figure out what it is, that we also understand these contradictions in terms of power asymmetries, but also the contradictions within major powers that want to use the discomfort with the international rules order as it is, the status quo ante, when it's convenient to them. But when major powers invade smaller countries and take over territory, and it's not convenient for them to talk about sovereignty and states' rights, then, it's a totally different framing.
That is where the bone of contention lies, Professor MONDA. With all that you have highlighted, let's bring in probably the role of national sovereignty. We are conversant that the world has evolved, and as well we see changes, and of course the fact that many countries are now aware, and we can attest to the wind of change that is blowing across the African continent. So in your perspective as somebody who understands international politics, international relations, and
Madam Chair, the power dynamics of global power, Madam Chair, the power dynamics of global power competition will continue. I do not see major powers, major regional powers, like Russia, like China, like India, like Brazil, or even like South Africa, taking a step back and having a lesser role. But I also don't see major hegemons like the European Union or the United States. I don't see them always playing to the rules-based international order when it is not in their interest. So take, for example, the convenience within which major powers on the Security Council decide to address state sovereignty. When it's in their favor, China will talk about a rules-based international order and will talk about states' rights, but will not want to